So, since you're already onto it, what do you think about AI?
Well, what I think of AI, if I look at it from two perspectives, one as an investor and one as being part of the business myself and building it, AI is your friend in the sense that you can ask a bunch of questions of the value chain of the business so you can identify what areas can you be more capital effective with and what roles might be either augmented or done entirely by AI. But in the end, I look at AI as great idea generator and also great at finding facts about how a business works, particularly if it's available and your friend doesn't really speculate. Then you just get a really true sense of where there's going to be opportunities to grow the business and also where there's going to be opportunities to save money.
I like how you call it a friend. Not a lot of people are calling it a friend, right? Well, I
Yeah.
take it back. A lot of, like, say, Hollywood, they're not calling AI a friend. I mean, what do you think about AI as it relates to people's likeness and generative AI, especially with content?
That's obviously a really tough topic. I kind of look at it in a sad way where if I want to make a film 20 years ago and I want to leverage things that doesn't cost me much, I can say, I can mention a city like Stockholm, that's where I'm from, and Stockholm has conjures ideas and images of lots of things for the viewer. So that doesn't cost me anything. I don't have to pay Stockholm a royalty. I don't have to pay him anything. Now, on location, just like anywhere, I might have to pay a location fee,
Yeah.
but you basically leverage assets like a country name, a city name, and all of a sudden you go into something where you make an animation.
Okay.
So animation is expensive, but you might then not have to pay the actor for the acting because it's animation.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the voices on animation for the animation to perhaps have more success, then you have a shot at let's bring in a celebrity that's well known, has a good voice. Lion King comes to mind. One of the most awesome films in the animation world, I think, to this day. And part of it was they had the best voices in Hollywood at the time. So now, if you get to AI in terms of replacing name, image, and likeness, it sucks because it's doable, and there will be people doing it. But the question is it going to rise to the top? And the unfortunate thing of business has to do with supply and demand.
Yeah.
If there's demand for things that replaced a lot of really hardworking people in Hollywood or anywhere else for that matter, that sucks. But demand is what pays the bills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we talk about it a lot with
Yeah. So it's
adoption.
really
Yeah.
tough, and I don't know what a recommendation could be for people that will be partially displaced or slowly be displaced. But I understand that it's significant besides the NIL issue and AI is the fact that it's cheaper.
NIL. What's NIL?
Name, image, and likeness,
Okay.
basically owning a person's name, image, and likeness that can then be replaced with AI in some ways or copied in a way or close enough where it becomes a legal challenge to
Yeah.
figure out, is that really something that the person has a claim to be compensated for or not, So that's going to be really tough too, the legality of some of these suits coming forward. But my point would be, unfortunately or fortunately, if you want to make a film cheaper, you can make it cheaper in a different part of the US. You can go to Canada. It's been going on for a long time. Or you can go to a whole entire country where the cost of living and cost of production is really, really low. And that's another challenge for Hollywood that has been kind of the epicenter for content in particularly movies and television.
So you're a big fan of lifestyle brands. How
I
do you
am.
see AI with that?
I think AI can help allow a celebrity, for example, or someone that has a good presence on social media to start their own business much easier.
Mhm.
So the cost of doing business or the entry barriers are a lot lower. So I do think it will be a lot easier to start a business.
Okay.
And that's fun because most lifestyle brands start with a huge passion of what makes their heart beat.
Right.
And kind of I called it the jolt of a brand. And these celebrities or people that have a following, if they can make that jolt heard, now when there's going to be a huge amount of new companies started, it's going to become that same problem. Okay, how do I rise above the noise, so to speak, or how am I heard through the noise? And that's going to become an increasingly harder problem. And things will go faster in the sense that you might have a shot at having buzz for something that went viral, um, and or there might be some sort of new channel of not necessarily social media, but a new channel where people find information that if you're first coming in, it may not be as much the crowd. It may not be as crowded, but then you have a shot at being seen. But at the speed of how people move from one content to another, you're going to have faster rises and faster falls as well.
Yeah.
So if a person now with AI's help wants to start a business that's more not just the incredible passion of what they have, but they wanted to build it into a business. AI again can help by lowering the cost. AI can help with projecting what it might look like in 5 years. And AI can then also help you identify what areas of business you really should focus on so that it can be a possibility to exit that business if you really want to build a business that's going to be sold.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you like it?
I like it. Of course, that's also a little bit selfish in the sense that I'd like to look at the glass half full in general. I'm a kind of a positive outlook in general of life and business. And I have a zest for both living and a zest for helping businesses grow. So to me, I try to look at what is the positive we can do now that is specifically good for the business.
Yeah.
But of course, then you have this good is what type of positive social impact could business A or B or C have? That's something that I'm probably more concerned about now than I perhaps were in my 20s. So I think again I look at it what's positive, but I am of course very worried about how the power of decision making power in very damaging outcomes. That's scary. That scares me. Anything from waking up really not just have my head in the sand and see the wars going on and see where AI can take over and AI might have a shot at pushing, the nuclear bomb button. That is really, really alarming. And I certainly don't have an answer to how to stop the development of AI for that to even not become an issue, because obviously we all be gone pretty much.
Oh, well, I mean, it sounds pretty dire, but I mean, where are you? I guess how are you keeping up with information as it relates to AI? Like, where do you go to seek out information or do due diligence?
You know, what I do it in spurts. So it could be a time when I kind of do listen to certain podcasts that might have an AI angle. It could be, um,
What are some of the podcasts?
um, what's some of the podcasts. Sam Harris.
Okay.
Um,
I know you like Ben Thompson.
Ben Thompson is exceptionally sharp and fun when it comes to tech. And yes, I do subscribe to his newsletter, and I don't listen to his podcast, but I read his blogs, or I'm not sure if he calls it blogs, but yeah. So Ben
Yeah.
Thompson is probably my favorite, even though this is not necessarily about AI, but I like the podcast that's been recently introduced to me is called Acquired.
Okay.
Super deep dives into companies, anything from IKEA to LVMH to right now I'm listening to Novo Nordisk.
Hmm.
And I find Acquired, those guys are unbelievable. And it's just, some of them are 4 hours long.
Yeah, they're quite
Um,
lengthy. They've been at it for a little while now.
Yeah, and I look forward because I haven't listened to too many yet, but
Oh, they got
that's
plenty of a catalog for
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
All right. So, what do you think about the future of lifestyle brands as we move forward?
Yeah, so future of lifestyle brands, I look at lifestyle in the same in the how I just describe a lifestyle. Lifestyle can stem from an activity, it can stem from art, it can stem from music, and it can stem from culture. So that's kind of how I look at lifestyle. What is a lifestyle brand? And I think a lot of these will have AI will help generate a lot more new companies.
Hmm.
But I also think I think AI will also, with the speed of social media, make it, as I mentioned earlier, like quick ups and really fast downs. So it's hard to build a sustainable business with lifestyle brands today because the sentiment of the customers changes faster now than it did, I would say, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago.
What do you think about fast fashion?
Fast fashion, then you get into the concept of excess consumption.
Hmm.
Um, so as I get older, I tend to not have the desire to own as much stuff, and that includes fast fashion, meaning even though, yeah, it's less expensive, um, but I personally prefer to buy something that, even though it's more expensive and that makes me feel better almost, even though it doesn't have to be luxury, but just the idea of buying something you feel like the quality is there. Whereas some of the fast fashion, it's a sense that you're gonna wear it for a little while and then throw it away, and where does it go from there? So I am not really keen on when I see how inexpensive some of these products are, because you really start to question where it's made and who made it.
Yeah.
Where there's definitely uh, questioning if it's fair labor practices that are really adhered to or not. So
Where do you see lifestyle brands like? Where do you see the most amount of advancement happening in the future?
in lifestyle,
Yeah.
well,
What?
I like to think, and I'm going to contradict myself here. I like to think that innovation plays a role. So if you talk about skateboarding, which I have a lot of experience with, innovation is not really that exciting for skateboarders. They stick to technology that's been around for 30, 40 years. Material innovation is not interesting. What's interesting is um, the visual feel and look of everything around skateboarding. It could be, if you're a kid that's, let's say, 12 years old, and you see this red-haired, blue-haired skaters, like, hey, I like his hair. Oh, he skateboards. And then he gets a little closer, like, oh, there's a motif on the bottom of the skateboard. I like that. Is he gonna figure out, well, this product weighs, this many less gram or more gram? He's not gonna care. And that goes all the way to the Olympians today. Could you make a skateboard more conducive to the tricks they do if you really added technology? You probably could,
Hmm.
but then it's not the lifestyle anymore. It's the utility of, oh, I can ollie 1 inch higher.
So what you're talking about, you have Pal who made the flight deck, right?
Uh-huh.
And so that, I mean, how often does that happen? Change, and then you have Andy
Again,
Anderson.
I'll give credit to George Powell, who invented, or with his team, his R&D team, invented or introduced those boards. And that particular style of products have existed, and people have tried over again. We even tried with Birdhouse,
That's right.
and I think perhaps their product was better than ours. Not sure, but it was the right timing. Almost everything has to do with timing, where skateboarding's lifestyle aspect had cooled off a little bit. So all of a sudden, product innovation in wheels. Again, George Powell's come up with some incredible formulas lately that has been appealing to certain parts of the skateboard demographic. And then with the skateboard, I understand, I haven't ridden one myself, but I've stood on one. So I can't say that I've ridden it enough to say whether they're something I would ride for a long time or not. Because in the end, people get bored and they want a new motif on their skateboard. So then you have to have a new graphic.
Hey, I used to snap my board when I wanted a new one when I was younger because I was
That
like, "I want a new graphic."
focusing a board was the
Yeah,
trend in the 90s.
yeah.
That was like a cool factor that you could break because it wasn't that easy to break a board. Maybe
Well, if it
some were a
had
little thinner.
bonite, remember bonite? That
Well,
was so
they
hard to
were hard to
break.
break
It was
because that was paper layers between wood and which had huge issues, unfortunately, and fortunately, because once they got rid of that, their newer boards became very popular. With the
yeah.
proper regular 7-ply with the better glues and the right contour of the concave and double kick and all that.
When you talk about boards being shaped a certain way or maybe made a certain way
Yeah.
to increase the utility of it,
Hmm.
the only person I've seen do it recently was Andy Anderson because his shape is meant to be skated the way he likes to skate,
Hmm.
right? So he
Hmm.
shaped it that way.
Yeah.
No other board has really done that.
No. So if you go back in time, like one of the things that I believe I really cared about was to make the board that worked with the type of skating I wanted to do.
Okay.
So for me, the freestyle board, of course, was shaped the way I skateboarded. Very specifically, how was the shape of the nose,
Yeah, yeah.
how was the shape of the tail, how wide and how long,
The freestyle, not the street
not in
version.
the freestyle, and then how long of a nose that you want from the whole pattern on the back and the front was very important. And then I wanted to get into street skating, and then of course you looked at everything else, and then you just customized it to yourself, and you wanted to visually look appealing. So it was both vanity and utility.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I came out with a kind of a hybrid, which the hybrid today looks similar to what people refer to as popsicle, but it was a little bit more square. And that was also kind of where I blended freestyle with some of the street skating, where it's much narrower street board shape than the current standard. The current standard at the time was like 9.5-inch wide. Was kind of most of them were that
Mhm.
way, and the freestyle board was like 7 in general. So then the one I came out with was kind of in between. It was a little shorter than the longer street board. Um, or vert board, but longer than my freestyle board. But it was kind of stuck in the middle where no one really wanted to. It didn't really take off, and that was okay. But I loved riding it.
Was that the PAL one?
It was about my third shape on PAL. Yeah, well, maybe fourth shape.
Because I remember the one with, the Viking skull, the same graphic you had on the freestyle.
Yeah, no,
And
this one had different graphics.
oh, okay. Because that one, that street board was one of my earlier boards. I love that board.
Yeah,
I remember the nose on it. At that time, there wasn't a nose that was flat on many of the shapes. So I dug it. But
yeah.
skateboarding, notoriously, in my opinion, influences a lot of other lifestyle brands that are much bigger
Mhm,
or they make more money. What are
mhm.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in hindsight, you can look at if you look at today and look back at the 80s and 90s, that were really the golden years of skateboard brands being lifestyle drivers. And of course, if you sell skateboards, hard goods, you rely on participants. If you sell apparel and tie it to skateboarding, if you sell footwear and tie it to skateboarding, you 40x your market more or less. So you have companies who did phenomenally in apparel, which would be Supreme is a really good example, who became massively bigger than the biggest hard goods brand ever.
Yeah.
And then to even top that, even bigger, Vans got much bigger than even Supreme, although Vans started much sooner. And again, much, much bigger than the biggest hard goods brand in the history of skateboarding. So this, in some ways, they fell into the business perhaps, but if you're a really smart business person, you're going to go like, how can I leverage a core, passionate um, group of people and their brands in a product category that's really going to appeal to the core? Well, skateboards is one. And then, of course, apparel. You could argue that eyewear, you could argue that things that can augment the feeling and vibe of skateboarder can then become much bigger because there are a lot of fans out there. It could be family members, it could be uncles, it could be daughters, it could be sisters or brothers, it could be whatever that never stepped on a skateboard ever, right?
Yeah.
So that's what's exciting about when you have some of these niche activities like skateboarding, and it really allowed it to become a lifestyle driver for one main reason, that you can ride a skateboard down Main Street in any city in the world.
Yeah.
So therefore you can see the skateboarder and they also say, oh, that's a cool shirt.
Yeah. Yeah.
What brand is that? I like that. And it could be, in this case, explaining it from a skateboard roots perspective, Supreme as an example, or a pair of Vans. And in the very beginning, even in the 70s and 80s, particularly 80s when I skated, most of my career was in 80s. You would be able to travel the world. At that time, Vans was not big, but you could go to Oslo, Norway, or Sydney, Australia, and you would see the few with Vans, and you'd go up to them, and you're like instant friends because you
Yeah.
have that
No, I
bond.
remember.
And now, of course, you go to Shanghai and you see a 13-year-old wear Vans. They probably never stepped on a skateboard ever.
Mhm.
And of course, Vans reaped the benefit of that because now the core became fashion. And that's why you can look at it from today's perspective. What niche is out there that could grow beyond its core audience if you want to build a big business?
So let me get your take on this then. Nike
Mhm.
started in running.
Yeah,
That's where they made their bones.
yeah,
But as of late, let's say the past 6, 8 years,
yeah,
that market share has been eroded
yeah,
by brands that focused more on running the way
yeah.
they did in the early days, right?
Right, right.
You have On and Hoka, and
Hmm.
it's like, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
What are your thoughts about that shift?
Yeah,
Because
so I always say the market is bigger than all of us. The market is bigger than Nike, even though Nike is huge. And when the market, there's just change of sentiment in the market.
Mhm.
In this case, they lost their focus on running to a degree, and or a very cool innovation came along, or a funky design or a new material that is not necessarily making running better, but it's new and it's interesting. And most people that are core, yes, they do like and stick with the brand for some time, because once you get used to a certain shoe, you usually stick with it. And I am an intermediate runner, so I can relate to that. Um, and to me, as an intermediate runner, I never looked at Nike as a running shoe because I started running in my older age, and Nike to me was um, Air Max, or Air.
Yeah, yeah.
So to me, I always looked at Brooks or Asics or whatever, and all of a sudden, and they were just, Asics is probably just as old as Nike, I think. We can fact check that. But you have newer brands that are coming in. Hoka is definitely newer. It's not brand new, but it's newer, and they really were able to get a design that was appealing to a market that Nike did not serve, or that market didn't really look at Nike for that, for what they were looking for. So therefore, you have a trend that those brands are doing well, and then you have the trend that running is now popular again. In the 80s, if you recall or read at history, you have the aerobics phenomenon that
Yeah, yeah.
put Reebok on the map, right, with their particular aerobics instructor
I think
shoe.
of Suzanne Summers and Jane Fonda.
There it just comes to mind. So it has a lot to do with celebrity and the trend in the marketplace where aerobics became very big, then it kind of fell off,
Yeah, yeah.
and then resurrected as yoga and Pilates,
Yeah.
some decades later. And I think Lululemon is a perfect example there too. And let's say if Lululemon only sold yoga mats, all right. So how many yoga mats are sold? We can just play with the math. Maybe.
You're making a case that Peloton should have done more wearables as opposed to just the hard good.
That's an interesting one. I haven't studied them enough, and I don't use Peloton. I'm aware of who they are. That's a good play. But I think what they were so smart with was this whole concept that Oh, I don't have the time to go to the gym.
Yeah.
Of course, the investment in one of their equipment is really high.
Yep.
So it is also sometimes difficult for hard goods companies to make apparel. Someone came to me, it's like, why don't you approach someone to make Tesla apparel? Can someone pull it off? I'm sure some super genius marketing creative mind can do it, but would it really be appealing enough where it's going to make sense for Tesla to do it?
What if they did it as a different name?
Yeah, but then, again, if Tesla has no intention of ever selling the company, then it doesn't matter
That's
because,
valid, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
But if you have the mindset like, "Ooh, this is too big of a business for me. I'm going to bring it to a certain level, and I'm going to try to have a couple of legs to stand on it, assuming you have a stool, like maybe three minimum, and then four would be better. And maybe that apparel is under a different brand. And then when someone comes and wants to buy, it's like, we don't care about the brand. It's like, okay, I'll keep doing that. You buy the car company and you keep going."
That's funny because a couple brands have sold off portions of their IP,
Hmm.
right? Or licensed portions of their
Yeah.
IP that are not part of their core competency.
Yeah.
Going back to the shoes though, New Balance.
Yeah.
This is because when you were talking about it, I was thinking, okay, New Balance is a brand that's been around a while.
Yep.
They've had stigmas.
Yep.
I mean, there's TikTok videos of your father wearing the New Balances,
Right.
but they've had a resurgence.
Yeah.
And even in a lot of their marketing, they've shown that running's for everyone. So you have body shapes of all types. Like
Hmm.
even Action Bronson has a signature line of New Balances.
Yeah.
And he's a thicker guy.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, what do you think about brands that are able to get hit with the stigma of being stodgy or not of trend, but then they are able to go full circle? Like, what are your thoughts about that?
It's again, I think if you have really creative, my belief in any lifestyle brand, the driver is going to be a creative person, creative director, if you want to use a more of a title. And that creative director may need some operational help to make it happen, rather than an operational guy going in and say, "Oh, we should do this jean brand." But if you don't have a really good creative director on where is that gene going to be sold, who is going to buy that gene, and then looking at the macro trend, is the timing right? Is the
Yeah.
timing right? So I think creative direction is hugely important in building a lifestyle brand. Um, so I think that with footwear like New Balance, there was two things going on from my perspective. One, yeah, it's your dad's shoes, and there was a reason for that because they were utilitarian by making different width shoes, which is a nightmare from an operational perspective because of
But
inventory.
it's sorely needed by people who have
It's
wide feet like myself,
sorely
let me tell
needed.
you.
So then the lure, of course, is, well, we have this core audience of 55 plus men that
Uh-huh.
wear the shoes. And you look over, it's like, whoa, what? But our shoe is just as good technically as a Brooks or a Nike, or when they do lab tests for, you know, certain level of cushioning, certain level of how long they last. So, like, someone goes in and says, "We like to make more money." It could be the family, if it's family owned, or it could be um, some board of directors saying, "We're kind of sitting stuck here, and yeah, we're profitable, but don't we want to do more than this?" And that's probably what's going on somewhere. So that decision was made by the board.
Mhm.
Majority. Sometimes it's just one person controlling the board, and maybe that's what the case in this case. And said, we should try to appeal to much lower audience because our serviceable area of market is very limited. It's 55 up. Well, still pretty big, but
Yeah.
if you look at everyone else, that may have stretched the demographic from toddlers to until you are 80 or 90 years old. So I think that's probably what ended up happening. But the market sense, some creative person realized we can make this cool.
Yeah.
And these are five people that are super relevant right now, that are juxtapositioned against this old man in gray hair who's wearing these really comfortable shoes. That could be done in a very comedic way, and it can be done in a practical way, or it can just be a full on cool factor way. You run a big event, could be a big concert, it could be something where, oh my God, she is on stage. It's a she's wearing New Balance.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that becomes like a trend because she is so powerful in her influence, whoever that person may be.
Yeah.
Um, I think a similar thing happened with Crocs. Crocs was seen as, uh, garden shoes for people that were probably
Or
older.
chefs that
Or yeah, utilitarian in a sense, chefs that was easy and practical to get in. And somehow, again, creative direction or creative marketing generally came in there, and he did a kick-ass job. I think his name is Terrence Riley.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Put that in the show notes.
so yeah, he came in there and he made Crocs cool. And there are not many people like that who can sense the market,
That's true,
because
man.
even a smart guy like him, um, you could try, but if a market sentiment is so ingrained and just starting to happen,
Yup.
there's a length of that market sentiment that I think is hard to cut too short. And of course, there's no rhyme or reason in some historic examples where, well, that I'm sure someone can find an exemption to my rule here, but certain market sentiment, it takes a while for it to kind of,
It's the rule, not the exception.
yeah. So yeah, so I feel that again, it goes back to creatives can come up with an incredibly smart way, an incredible repositioning of a product, especially if it's been around for a while. Because then it has some heritage that you can kind of play off of in a comedic way. It's like, yeah, we used to be this, but we do this. So it's like
Yeah.
we also do that. And then because this younger artist really made it big with youth, all of a sudden now it becomes a household name. And I can say that all brands, all brands that become household names in lifestyle that are fairly big, it starts with basically 18 to 24-year-olds, either male or female or both, to make a brand happen, because 10 years later they're 24 to 34 or whatever, and then they wave it, this is my brand, and that's become like a household name. So I think that's another rule, in my opinion, that is something to follow. Creative direction is hugely important, and then the idea is, if you want a household name in lifestyle, it's 18 to 24, and you just have to find the right ones that can influence that market, and then over time you will both, as they grow, you will stretch the demographic if you really are fortunate that your brand is going to be appealing for a larger audience.
Yeah, because what you're talking about makes me even think about the market for Buck Mason. Buck Mason, they've been at it for a little over a decade, but they've come to more prominence recently.
Hmm.
I think from my perspective, I like them more so now because they have broad shoulder clothing.
Mm.
And as somebody who has big shoulders
Yeah.
but a smaller waist, it was hard to find stuff that had a certain look or feel
Yeah.
and a certain quality. And then, there they are, similar to On or Hoka.
Mhm.
You know, they don't have as many wide shoes, which sucks, which is why I like New Balance, because
Mhm.
they make, shoes for hobbit feet.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many more humans, right? But Buck Mason isn't an 18 to 24 brand,
No.
but there creates gaps, right?
Mhm.
In the market space for different things when
Yeah.
you start talking. We could talk about that
Mhm.
forever.
Mm.
But I want to get your thoughts on, what do you think about crypto, especially since Bitcoin just crossed, as of this recording,
Mhm.
the 100,000 mark.
Yeah. Yeah, so my take on crypto is as follows. I think that if we can get financial transactions cost
Hmm.
down to a penny, when that becomes ubiquitous, where Lightning Network and like competitors come up with something where you don't have to pay the 35 cents, you don't have to pay the 2.5 points, that will open up the global market in a big way. So I like that part of I guess that's more blockchain technology rather than crypto per se. But they work in tandem, because if you can imagine all these people in anywhere from Argentina, where the inflation is insane, to other countries, they can have basically a phone, they can have a Telegram account, and there's a wallet on there that ties whatever they want to buy through this Lightning Network. It costs them nothing. They can buy a digital asset for 5 cents if they want a cool sticker of a JPEG on their phones. It's a virtual sticker. Or if they want to buy something more physical, that's a little bit more expensive, but it's going to allow microtransactions that will just make business explode in a lot of these small businesses and selling digital assets and cool stuff to people all around the world. So that's how I look at it. And from a investments perspective, I think it's a little bit speculative, and I would probably personally, I just put a little bit in there, almost like Las Vegas, where yeah, I talked to this guy and he said this could be a good fun coin to play with. But my sentiment is the only one coin I feel a little bit more comfortable with is Bitcoin, because it's not like one person controlling it. I do have money in Solana, but Solana is still run by a company. It's run by a CEO,
Yeah, yeah.
whereas Bitcoin, it seems like it's more of a just more comfortable. That's probably the best way for the
It's
limited.
more decentralized.
Yeah, it's a little bit more comfortable for me to feel like, hey, that's probably where I will put money in just for storage, because there's only a set amount of coins that will exist, and believing in supply and demand, unless governments will shut it down or regulate it further, I think it's makes sense that it's going to go up over time. So for me, it's like, if I put money in there, it's something that I would maybe let sit for 10 years, 15 years, and not worry whether it's 100 now or 60 tomorrow. um, but it is something that I believe is less speculative,
Mhm.
assuming regulation doesn't hit, than all the other coins, all of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, my opinion.
I got you. Have you heard of X and O? Anybody that listens to me yammer on the mic. So X and O, it's free to use and it's immediate settlement of transactions. So it is crypto. It's X and O is their ticker sign, but it's a nonprofit organization. They've been around a little while now, um, but we can settle everything in seconds, and I love
Speed.
that.
That's
Because I can send you whatever if I want to purchase, to your point, and it's done. It's settled. If we wanted to sell me a house, I don't have to wait for the bank to open. It just gets done. And it's settled in seconds. Because most transactions, especially debit cards, you swipe, but it's not settled, especially on the weekend, until Monday. And you're kind of like, in our world today, really? We need these, I call them profit choppers. In this
mm,
particular case, the banks are our profit choppers. They want their cut.
yeah.
But I mean, I heard somebody, and I'm sure if you Google it, there's a substantial amount of people that get a piece of the transaction every time you swipe or
Hmm.
tap.
Hmm.
But in this particular case, it eliminates the majority of those people,
Mm.
which, that it's not so much that banks want regulation because of it not being good for, I guess you'd say, our society. I think it's just more that they want regulation because it stifles their ability to make profits.
Hmm. I
you
can
know,
see that.
but yeah. So when you talk about those things, I always think about use case examples. So what are your thoughts on blockchain? Moving forward. I mean, do you see blockchain being something like in your world, the things that you deal with? What do you think about blockchain?
I don't think too much about blockchain, mainly because my little knowledge of it is, it seems more complicated and slow than it should be when you have like a centralized way of having a database, what have you. So I don't have enough knowledge to really um, have an educated opinion. Really, I know of it. I'm not sure how I would use it
Hmm.
to my advantage in my businesses. Um, I can see on principle what I know, that it sounds nice that certain contracts can be settled um, in in a way that would remove a lot of legal costs, because it's an automatic tracking of sales, for example, that then would trigger a royalty of some sort. So I see some practical approach to it, but I I'm a little bit uncomfortable with it because I don't know enough about it, where how it could benefit the businesses that I am involved in.
Do you like tech?
Semi. I'm not super tech savvy, but I'm a late adapter. I would probably say I listen to what I believe are some really smart people in various aspects of business, and then I kind of jump in and say, okay, now I'm comfortable because they've kind of vetted it for me.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm not a pioneer at all in when it comes to tech.
I think tech is very much like any other interest, right? Like if you're into it, you're into it. If you're not, you just I think people lose sight of that, especially if you're into tech, especially.
Hmm.
You're in the bubble
Hmm.
and you think it's the most important thing in the world.
Right.
But there's so many other humans that just give
Right.
two shits about it.
That's right.
You know what I mean? It's like people are like, "Oh my gosh, did you see that this happened with this piece of tech?" And it's like, "Yeah, but how many people are actually using it? Do they care? They're just trying to get through their day,
Mm.
depending upon your economic or even where you're located, right? You might have bigger problems like food insecurity or home,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think sometimes we get lost in our own bubbles when it
Yeah.
comes to that. Tech's a big one
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah.